Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. As we were driving up, you might have noticed we are at another historic fort here in Washington. This is about to be absolutely epic, and it's covered under our Discover Pass. Now, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is showing you guys the structure that they have here. There's a lot of buildings and there's a lot of information, so we're going to have a really good time today here at Fort Columbia. Now, if you don't have a Discover Pass, don't worry. They do have a pay kiosk here for day passes or for your year pass. Now, I will say this, if you do pick up a year pass here or an annual pass, you are going to end up having a heat paper pass, and those are not the best. We did learn, however, that if you have this at a state park, you can actually take it there and get it redeemed for the placard that works a little bit better on the same day. So I'm not sure if there's one of those offices here, but here is the pay kiosk. Here at Fort Columbia, they have one of the most complete assemblies of buildings that were used at the time of this being a fort. It's pretty interesting because this is said to be looking very similar to what it did at the time of its use. And you can find here a map that has all of the different buildings highlighted, and then also the battery itself. So ahead of us, we see A, which is right here. Now, this would have been the barracks, and now it is the interpretive center here. So we're going to try to go inside and see if they have any patches also. They also have something called the Historic Walk, where you can actually go around and see several pieces of the They also have something called the Historic Walk, where you can go around and see various pieces of the battery and various viewpoints. It's kind of interesting, and there's a lot to do here. It is very different than whenever we went to Cape Disappointment and they only had the remains of the fort. In fact, this is much more intact, and historically you can learn a lot more by just visually seeing the various buildings. So that's what we're going to do today, is just kind of explore around a little bit, see what we can find, and this is going to be fun. Sadly, the interpretive center is not open today, but from this porch, oh my goodness, the view is everything. Now, this would have been where the enlisted men would have stayed, and now they've turned it into an education center, which I can see inside, and there's good information in there. I'm missing out on these brain wrinkles, and well, it's okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to put together some of the pieces without the interpretive center today. And sometimes that's how it is. You have to kind of come here, keep an open mind, and then be willing to do the Google fingers at the end once you leave to kind of put together the rest of the pieces. So that's what we're going to be doing. Now, along with the barracks, they do have officers' quarters and also admin, and I think that that's kind of interesting that it's all right here and still very visible. They also do have interpretive programs here where you can come and learn a little bit more, and they have ranger talks and things like that. So that's pretty cool, and definitely put some context to these amazing buildings that I'm seeing behind me. I will show you a few more of them, don't worry, but first we're going to take this little Discovery Nature Trail. It's a little interesting, but it definitely does take us down to the actual battery itself, which I'm really excited about sharing with you because this is epic looking. A couple of interesting things at this stop. Right here you'll find a QR code that's actually on the side, and it says scan this code with your smartphone to see historic photos, military blueprints, and maps of this site. Also, we have a sign here that tells us a little bit more about how they actually built the battery that is before us. This was an architectural feat that took almost 20 months to complete, and you can see kind of the basics of what that would have looked like as they not only constructed it but also laid in the framework for the large guns. Now, we do have an illustration here about the horizontal crest and then also how the gun would have gone in here. So it would have been hidden from the visibility of those out here in the water. But it would definitely have a big impact. So in a minute, we're going to go down here and check this out. It is really cool to see, though, how intact this site is. Of course, after having seen Fort Canby, I kind of already have seen how the layout of these work. So being able to see a bit more of the depth of the creation here at Fort Columbia, it's pretty fascinating to see how those two sites correlate. I always tell you guys, sites can usually work in with another site if you kind of follow the dots, and this one definitely does. In fact, both of these ports were both used to protect the Columbia River and also the Pacific Ocean. So it's kind of interesting to see how they were created. Each of these buildings has a small sign outside of it as to what it was and what it now is. This one was the guardhouse, and now they have turned it into the public restroom. But there is actually a picture on the guardhouse of it during its heyday as a guardhouse. In fact, here, the guard maintained order, prevented unauthorized persons from entering or leaving the fort, and kept a close watch over the prisoners. So how did they do that, though? Well, if you look in at the very back there, you can actually see that there were, in fact, cells. Yeah, they have bars back there. Of course, this building is not accessible to us right now, where we can go in this particular room, but it's kind of fascinating to see that back there. Like many of the stops that we are making, they are currently working on this one and trying to make sure that the renovations are here for us all so that we can have a lot of educational things. And I really appreciate that. It really keeps us on our toes, it keeps those brain wrinkles coming, and well, it preserves the site so that future generations can appreciate this the same way that we are. So let's move on. We are now standing at the top of the battery, and from this angle you can't go down. In fact, they have this rail right here. You can, however, visit it from the bottom, which is what we're going to do in just a moment. But here you can see how they built this into the mound of dirt, like that illustration had shown us. And in fact, if you were sitting here and just looking on this from a distance, there's no way that you would know there is a gun like right over there and another one like right over there. It's very concealed, and because they also have the grass on the mound, it just looks like part of the mountain with like a building up here at the top. So it would have looked like a regular everyday residential area. And yeah, so it would have been very interesting to suddenly realize that is not what this is. But yeah, this is pretty neat. We still have to go down to the bottom, but first I want to go right over here. There is something very, very interesting there. As we move down here, we find this sign that actually says that Battery 246, which is what we're looking at in front of us, took nearly 50 years to finish. In fact, they began during World War II. They poured the concrete, they made protective shields, and by that time, the mounted guns had become obsolete due to improvement in technology. In fact, in 1950, after it no longer was considered to be something that was useful to the United States government, it was transferred to the Washington State Park System so that they could have this as a historic reference for us to come and see the what once was. In fact, it's kind of interesting to see now because there's so much of it that is intact, even though they have removed obviously the big guns, so to speak, and anything that would have been of top national security. We can still see a lot. And here they actually have something set up so we can visualize the size of the guns used here. It just goes to show that this was a massive massive, massive attempt of taking care of the coastline. It was a very serious thought that there was going to be an invasion on the Columbia, and because of that they wanted to protect the waterway and also the ports along the way, because that was the threat they were assessing to be the worst at that time. But these guns never saw action, and it's just another thing that was a preventative measure that was taken during World War II because of the fear that was going on in our country. And so it's kind of fascinating to see, but also a waste of money, which is kind of sad. Although it did provide jobs, it did also provide a military outpost that was used for a brief time. It ultimately ended up being something that didn't pan out in the long run. But now we have these ruins that we can come out and see even today. So at least in some small way we can understand military engagement a little bit more. Now there is a small trail that continues down toward the water, but it does not lead to the buildings, but it does lead to what used to be a dock. And now you can see lots of birds out there. Something I'm noticing as I'm walking over this hill here is there are all sorts of interesting buried bunkers, like this one right here. Just looks like a hill, and then all of a sudden it opens up and there's a bunker. Yeah, there's tons of these around here. This is a great sight. The real question is, can we go inside or is it closed? Wow. Oh, this is wild. Oh, this is very wild. Oh, it's super, super dark too. Wow. As we've come around, now we get to walk through a part of one of the batteries. And this is cool, guys. There are so many different viewpoints that give you an idea of perspective here. So I think I'm just gonna show you a few of them, and I'll see you again in just a minute on the other side. Wasn't that everything? Now this is just one of two batteries here on the property, because again, this was a massive project that they undertook, and it's kind of interesting that you can explore down in these under tunnels and kind of envision what it would have been like to be in each of these strangely proportioned rooms. There's a lot of rooms that seem to go to nowhere, but they had a purpose at one point. It would be fascinating to know a little bit more about those. So this is definitely going to be a continued project for me as I continue to seek those brain wrinkles, and I challenge you all to do this as well. Again, this is Fort Columbia, so get those Google fingers moving. Now, something I am noticing is below they have that track system, which I think they used to move things up to this area. Probably some kind of ammunition or possibly some kind of weaponry. But they do have two of these, one on each side. So it's kind of interesting, and it would make sense because each of these has access to one of those pads that would have been where the guns would have been placed. Now today while I'm visiting, they're doing a little bit of lawn work, so it makes it harder to share some of the information, but I will say I just got a couple brain wrinkles that I'm going to share with you. Even though this fort never saw an active day in active combat, they fired tons of rounds. They did a lot of target shooting, and the place that we just were at, Barracks 2, was actually the most widely used area for launching those target rounds. In fact, that area right there got a lot of use, and that little sign that I'm showing you right now, well, it tells you a little bit more about it. Definitely encourage you to come here, check that one out before you go into the barracks or after, but it'll just kind of put things into context a little bit more for you. It's really fascinating stuff. With that said, I'm a little confused as to why they're doing lawn work on a weekend. Typically they reserve that for a weekday kind of task because there's not as many people that are coming out to visit. But oh well, it is what it is. We'll just move on to another part of the park. We have now made it down to the main battery as you first come into the park. And this one is the one we saw earlier, and we were trying to kind of get an idea as to what to expect. But now I'm going in. I'm going in. Now it's pretty interesting to see the difference between this one and the other one because they're vastly different. The structure of this one has circular forms. So as you're going through, the wall suddenly bends and turns into a circle, and then you end up in another room, and it then is the exit. It's fascinating. Also, there's the long hall that has the towers up to the top, probably for similar reasons that the other one, but this one doesn't have the same look to it. The ceilings appear to be a bit taller on this one, and also something kind of fascinating that I found in both of them is as time has taken its toll on these buildings, there's starting to be these little stalactite and stalagmite kind of features that are throughout. It makes the floor kind of slick, but the ceiling, you can see them coming down and trying to get closer and closer to that floor. We're going to conclude this video right where we started, back at the van, off to our next adventure. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and places like this give you all of those brain wrinkles to make your time even more fascinating. Till next time guys, bye!